Hello everyone. So we have already done the first chapter of class ninth, that is matter, and matter in our surroundings basically. And what all we have covered over there, we have understood what exactly is matter, how many states are there in matter, I mean what all different states are there for matter, what are the physical properties of matter, and how the interconversion of the states takes place, what defines what is a matter and how the states vary from one to another, what all different properties are there in the matter which makes the states different, right? So now we are going to start the second chapter of our syllabus, and that is matter around us pure? And what we are going to learn in this, we are going to learn the extension of the same matter, the concept of matter, what we have learned in first chapter. So here what we are going to basically understand, we are going to understand what all we see around us, is it pure or it's not pure? Is it a mixture? It's an impure thing or it's a pure thing? How to identify the difference between pure and impure? And when we get to know that substances are impure, how to purify them. So that is the whole chapter is about. Okay, so we will be basically, we know the matter, now we will just analyze the matter on the terms of its purity. We will have some set of rules and some set of guidelines which we will follow, we will understand, and we'll figure out how to decide whether matter is pure or impure, and what comes under the pure matter, what comes under the impure matter, and eventually how to convert an impure thing into pure. So that is what we are going to cover. Okay, so now let's start the second chapter. Now all of us know what is matter. Everything which is occupying space, which is occupying volume, that is matter, right? Now assume if you look around yourself, everywhere you can find things. The matter can be in the form of liquid, can be in the form of solid, can be in the form of gas, it can be in any form, right? So assume I have taken two matters or two things in my observation. In one bowl, assume I have taken salt, and in the other bowl I have filled the garden soil. Okay, and now I ask you guys, or I do it myself, what we'll try to understand is, if we take a lens, an observation lens, or you can say, or what do you call it, it's a magnifying glass. You take the magnifying glass and look that matter under that magnifying glass. So what will you observe? If you take salt or sugar, okay, anything, and then if you'll observe it, you will find the small granules. I mean the size of the granules will look bigger now, not evenly shaped, basically not all of them are of the same shape and sizes, but looks like they are made up of same matter or same substance, because the color is same and you can't find any difference in look and feel of the granules which are there apart from their sizes. Now if you look your sand under the microscope or under the observation lens or magnifying glass, what would you find over there? You would find there are multiple different particles or different granules are there which are of different colors, and there are some other substances are also there, like small tweaks or some organic matter, like probably the pieces of leaves or anything like that. So basically what I'm trying to tell you over here is, when we are observing salt, what we find is only particle sizes are different, but the substance seems to be like made up of same kind of material. Whereas when I'm talking about soil seems to have different things in it, different particles of different colors. Sizes are definitely different, but the colors are also different, and it looks like different, made up of different material altogether. Basically they are not same, the particles are not same, particles are made up of different substances. So just by observation, if I ask you which thing seems to be made up of only single material, so we will say it is salt, because a soil is clearly seems like mixture of multiple different things. So this exactly is what we are going to understand, that why this is the difference, and if there is a difference in the matter like this, what do we call them? So basically this is nothing else but the difference between pure and impure matter. So what is pure? Pure matter in most generic form, if I say, is the matter which is made up of same material or same type of particles. sizes may vary, but apart from that, if you talk about the chemical composition is not going to change. For example, if I talk about, because we were talking about the salt itself, so salt is nothing else but NaCl, that is sodium chloride. So when you talk about salt, it's generally in the rock form, and then we crush it, and then basically it's mortared, and then that's how you get those small granules. So there is a chance when the crushing is happening, the particles have been broken not in a similar fashion, but have been broken into the random fashion, and hence the particle size is varying. But if you talk about the whole material is still made up of NaCl only. NaCl is what? See, when I talk about salt is made up of NaCl, Na and Cl, that is called as sodium chloride. Basically one substance, this is one compound, one molecule, or one type of molecule, not one molecule but one type of molecule. So basically whole salt, no matter how many granules we are considering, all are made up of this same material only. But if I talk about soil, as I mentioned, soil is made up of multiple things. When you'll observe it in the magnifying glass, you would find there is some sort of mica in it. Mica is what, if you have seen sand, in sand there's shiny particles are there, that is nothing else but mica. Okay, there are some silica particles. Okay, silica is SiO2, also one molecule which helps in composing your soil. Then I said there is some organic matter. And there are many more things, many other minerals are there. So basically your soil is not made up of one substance but multiple different substances, and hence the particles also look different with respect to each other. So this, because it is made up of different substances, this will be called as impure matter, because not only one substance but multiple substances have been mixed together, and then a particular matter has been formed. So this is your impure matter. Whereas the substance which is made up of only one type of substances or one type of composition, chemical composition, then it will be called as pure matter. We will understand this in much more detail, and I'll give you more examples on it. But for now, when the composition is same throughout, or the same molecule or same chemical composition is there in a matter, in that case it is called as pure matter. If there are multiple different things or multiple different substances are present which have different chemical composition formulas, different chemical formulas are there, or different substances have been mixed together, then it is called as impure matter. Let's understand both of these terms in detail now. So I have given you a small idea of what is pure and what is impure just by the help of two examples. Now let's understand in much more detail and then understand what is the further classification under pure matter and impure matter. So basically now we know that in all around us, in all our surroundings, whatever matter we can see, not everything is pure. It is mixed. Few things are pure and few things are impure, and it is very easy to identify which ones are pure and which ones are impure. The first and the basic rule to find out the pure substances, as I mentioned, it should be made up of only one kind of particles. So when I say one kind of particles, what do we mean by those particles? Those particles can be atoms also and can be molecules also. Now when you talk about, I hope you guys know what is element, what is compound, the basic definition of elements and compounds. So when you talk about element, let's say I talk about iron, or I talk about copper, or I talk about silver. So I take any of this. Let's say I have taken iron. Okay, iron's general formula is Fe. Okay, see, this is how iron looks like, right? And now when you talk about its composition, if I take iron piece, any iron piece, I talk about any iron piece, okay, no matter whatever the shape, whatever the structure, if it is made up of only iron, then what do we know? That iron is an element, a type of element, and in the iron piece all the atoms would be of iron only. So iron is an atom also. Okay, so iron is made up of same type of atoms basically. So throughout the iron piece would be made up of exactly same type of atoms. and that would be nothing else but iron atoms. My drawing is bad, so you can just see the good, beautiful diagram over here. So made up of same type of atoms. I'm just drawing the same thing over here. So all the atoms are the iron atoms. So basically, when you'll go deeper inside the substance, you will find that it is not made up of different type of smallest units or the basic units. The basic unit is same. Only the overall structure outside may vary depending upon the size and shape or whatever structure you have converted into. So structure doesn't matter at all, because inside the material composition is. Now I have taken an iron glass, or I have taken an iron rod, or I have taken an iron filling, or I have taken a small iron piece. Everything, all of these would be made up of only single type of atoms, and that is iron atom. So when any substance is made up of one single straight type of atoms or molecules. I have given you the examples of atoms right now. I'll give you the example of molecules also. Then it will be called as pure substance. Now let's take an example where we'll talk about same kind of molecules. If I talk about water, I've taken the water in a glass. Okay. And please don't assume that this water is dirty or this water has some other contamination. Nothing. Assume it has no other contamination but only water. Or I have taken it in a bowl or in anything. Okay. So if I have filled it with if these things are filled with the water, water's formula is H2O. So basically it is made up of two substances, two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. That's how your molecule also looks like. You got my point. So this is H2O. Now when you'll talk about water, no matter how it is kept, what shape it is taking, in which tumbler you have taken, everywhere the composition of water is not going to change. It will be made up of two hydrogens and single oxygen only. Everywhere the water molecule is going to be H2O, and when we are referring to water, all the particles inside the water will be nothing else but this molecule. Like this. Just see over here in this diagram. Throughout, what is happening? Throughout, two hydrogens, one oxygen, two hydrogens, one oxygen. That's how it is arranged. So either it can be same type of molecules or it can be same type of atoms. It can be anything. But it should be just one single kind of atom or molecule throughout the mass. It cannot vary. Then only it will be called as pure substance. Then it will be called as pure substances. Okay, as I mentioned just now that we can have two type of pure substances. One is elements, another is compounds. So compounds are the ones which will have molecules like water, and elements are the substances which are made up of single straight same type of atoms like iron. I can say copper, I can say zinc, silver, any element you talk about. Similarly, you talk about water, you talk about ammonia, that is NH3, this is ammonia. You talk about carbon dioxide gas, you talk about oxygen. All these things are pure because they are made up of exactly same type of molecules throughout. And because they are made up of same type of molecules throughout, you will find these systems homogeneous. What do we mean by homogeneous? That means they look exactly same throughout. The colors are not varying. Shapes may in the solids, but colors are not varying, and you won't find different layers forming inside. They are just even throughout. Now because they are made up of same type of atoms or molecules, their boiling point, which we have already discussed what it is, melting point, all these are going to be fixed. Basically, it will not vary. It will just remain same. For example, we already know what is the boiling point of water. That is 100 degrees Celsius. And it is going to remain 100 degrees Celsius. It's not going to vary from one place to another, or it's not going to vary if you keep it in a different tumblers or anything like that. So their boiling point and melting point is going to be fixed. Plus, you cannot separate them out, or you cannot break them into the further smaller pieces, not exactly pieces, but further smaller entities using a physical process. That means, what do I mean to say? When I say water, you cannot break water into hydrogen and oxygen just by supplying heat or just by applying pressure or anything like that. So any physical process cannot break it down into its further smaller entities. It cannot be broken, it cannot be divided any further. The element will remain the element. It will have same atoms throughout, and through any physical process you cannot separate the composition. You cannot separate them out. You cannot separate the hydrogen from oxygen. You cannot separate one iron atom from the another iron atom. That you cannot do. So what all is important? They have fixed melting point and boiling point. And second, cannot, or you can say composition cannot be changed. Chemical composition cannot be changed through physical process. What do you mean by physical process? Physical process is nothing else but heating, applying pressure, reducing the temperature, anything like that. When I say chemical composition, that means breaking them into further simpler substances. That means if you have, let's say, 1 lakh iron atoms in it, you are separating one iron atom from another iron atom. Or if you have water molecule, you're breaking down the water molecule and pulling out hydrogen and oxygen separately. That is practically not possible using the physical process. Chemical processes, yes, that means a chemical reaction will take place, but through physical means you cannot separate them out. Okay, so what exactly this whole thing means? This whole thing means that you cannot convert it into different matter. That means if you have iron, iron cannot be converted into something else just by physical means. Similarly, water cannot be converted into something else through the physical means. Only states can change. A solid iron can become a molten iron. Solid ice can become water, and water can become steam. That's all can happen, but internally the chemical composition will not vary. So basically, one matter cannot be converted into another matter just by physical processes in pure substances. Okay, so this is about our pure substances. Now let's understand what are mixtures. So mixtures is completely opposite of what we have learned for the pure substances. So what we have learned in pure substances, that there is only one kind of composition throughout, either same type of atoms or same types of molecules would be there. But in mixtures, it will be two or more than two pure substances when have been mixed together in no fixed proportion, random proportion. Then it is called as mixtures or impure substances. So basically, everything in its original form is pure. Basically, if you talk about anything in elemental form or the compound form, they all are pure. But when they are mixed together, they form the different matter, and that matter is called as mixture or impure substances. Okay, for example, I have taken an example of milk. When you look at the milk, would you be able to identify different particles in it? Basically, particles made up of different substances? No. Different composition? No. It looks homogeneous to me throughout. Basically, the appearance is same throughout. I cannot, through the naked eyes, so definitely I cannot figure out that there are different type of particles inside which have different chemical composition, or which are made up of different type of molecules and atoms. But sometimes we do. We are able to figure it out. I'll tell you how. If you boil the milk, you can see the fat layer on the top, which is generally called as malai, or what do you call it? Cream or anything like that. So that fatty layer comes on the top, which separates out itself from the milk. So milk is separate and that fatty layer is separate. That with these two things itself, you can understand that there is some difference between that layer and rest of the milk which is underneath that layer. So your milk is not one single compound. It doesn't have same type of molecules throughout. It has lot different type of molecules. I hope you must have heard of it at your homes. Your mothers would have told you that, "Beta, please drink milk because milk has all the good things, all good vitamins and minerals and all that." So it is a common saying that milk is a complete food, almost complete food, because it contains almost every vitamin and almost every mineral. So that's how it is told to us, at least in childhood. But actually it doesn't contain all of it, but many of it. For example, it has vitamin A, vitamin E, it has fat, it has proteins. And let me tell you one thing, all these are chemical compounds. All these have different chemical composition. All these have different molecular formulas. Molecular formula means all these have different formulas. If you talk in terms of chemistry, vitamin A has a formula, vitamin E has a formula, fat has a formula, and protein has a formula. So don't you think all these are different substances altogether, different molecules altogether, which have been mixed together and the milk has been formed? Now look at the composition. Look at the composition which has been mentioned on a milk bottle. I have just shown you the picture over here. So many things are present in milk. Even though it looks that it is homogeneous, it looks like it's same throughout, but the particles are too small to get identified through the naked eyes or under the lens. But it is made up of many different substances having different composition, many different vitamins and minerals having different chemical composition, different chemical formula, or you can, in more simpler terms, you can say different type of atoms and molecules, and hence this is called as mixture. Mixture is a more, you can say, a sophisticated term, and impure substance is a very unsophisticated term. So we will just call it mixture. Mixture means at least two or more than two substances have been mixed together of different composition, and that's how the mixture is formed. So we have clearly mentioned here two or more than two different kind of, I think I missed then, more than two different kinds of particles. Those particles can be two different kind of atoms, can be two different kind of molecules, or more than two different kind of atoms, or more than two different kind of elements or molecules will make a mixture. Okay, one example is milk. Let me talk about air. All of us know air has, we are inhaling oxygen, we are exhaling carbon dioxide. So at least if we don't know the whole composition of air, we know that at least air contains oxygen and carbon dioxide. So basically two different chemical compounds or two different type of molecules are present in our air. So air is also a mixture. Can we see any difference in the color throughout? Can we see any, can we make out the difference through the naked eyes? No. So it is not necessary that in the mixtures you will be able to see the differences through the naked eyes. It may look all symmetric throughout, but would have different composition overall. Similarly, let me take one more example. Let's say if you have taken salt and you have taken water, you have mixed them up together. So salt is mixed in the water. Now we know that salt has a specific formula, that is NaCl. That is its molecular formula, that is its composition, made up of sodium and chlorine. Water we know is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. These were two different, individually these both were pure. Now when they have been mixed together, these pure substances have been mixed together. Now the system what has formed, that is salt water, is a mixture now. It has two different type of molecules in it. So this is called mixture. So when we say mixtures, there can be two type of mixtures. One is homogeneous mixtures, as I have given the example, where you won't be able to figure out the difference just by looking at it, because it will look same throughout. The composition will look, there is no color change, no layer wise difference. So like salt water, you won't be able to differentiate the salt particle and the water particle. So when they look same throughout, the composition seems even throughout, then it is called as homogeneous mixture. And heterogeneous mixture are the ones which you can see that there are differences. I mean, there are many ways you can figure out the homogeneous. Maybe the particle size would be different, or it won't look even throughout in its composition. So we will discuss how to figure out homogeneous and heterogeneous mixture in detail. But for now, at least I hope you would have got the difference between pure substances and the mixtures. And moreover, the points which I had discussed for pure substances, that it has fixed boiling point, fixed melting point, all that is completely opposite over here. First of all, composition is not fixed. Composition is not fixed. We don't know in which proportion it has been added. If you'll ask me to make salt water or salt solution, I may add 1 spoon of salt, I may add on a pinch of salt, I may add 2 spoons of salt. So it can be very random composition. Composition is not fixed. Secondly, because composition is not fixed, there is no fixed melting point or boiling point. So boiling points and melting points may vary depending upon the composition. So it won't have a fixed proportion. So third point, again, we had discussed that we cannot convert it into different matter. For pure substances, we could not convert them into different matter just by physical processes, but we can do it over here. Right now, if I have taken, let's say, salt solution, through some physical means, I can separate out salt and water. Now, salt solution is one type of matter, salt is a second type of matter, and water is third type of matter. So this is your matter 1. This is your matter 2 and this is your matter 3. So basically, through physical means, through physical changes, through evaporation or through heating or osmosis, or not osmosis, sorry, reverse osmosis. So there are many ways you can just take out the salt out of salt solution. So basically you can separate out salt and water. So basically matter 1 can be converted into matter 2 and matter 3 just by physical means or physical processes, by heating, by applying pressure, by changing temperature, or by using different means of separation, or using different separating techniques. So that can be done over here, but not in the case of pure substances. So what we can write it over here, I think I have I'm just rubbing this off. I need some space to write. So matter can be converted into different matter through physical processes. Or different separation techniques. Okay, so this is the basic understanding and the difference between pure substances and mixtures or impure substances. Now we'll go in detail of elements, compounds, homogeneous mixtures and heterogeneous mixtures. Now let's understand what are elements. So elements are the substances which are made up of same type of atoms throughout. If you remember, I had given you example of iron, copper, zinc, aluminium. All these different type of substances, different type of names what I have taken are nothing else but elements, and they are made up of same type of atoms throughout. Number of electrons, number of protons, everything is going to remain same in these atoms. So when I say I'm talking about iron, as I had mentioned earlier, if I take an iron piece, it would be made up of iron atoms throughout. And when I'm saying iron atoms, these iron atoms will be exactly same in terms of number of electrons, number of protons. I hope you know that atoms are made up of electrons, protons and neutrons. So all these are going to remain same in this particular element. So elements are the substances which are made up of same type of atoms throughout, and you cannot separate these atoms with each other, or you cannot break it down into simpler substances like electrons and protons just by using the usual physical methods or by using simple heat, light or electrical energy. So you require way more to break them down into simpler substances further. Okay, so elements are substances made up of same kind of atoms throughout, which cannot be broken into simpler substances by physical or simpler chemical means using light, heat or electric energy. Simpler means in the simple laboratory environment. If you want to break it down into simpler substances, it requires a lot more energy and effort. Definitely it will be done through the electric energy or heat energy, but how? That's a different science altogether. Not through the usual methods, not in the normal laboratory methods. Okay, so this is what the elements are. So when we talk about elements, elements can be in the liquid form, in the solid form, in the gaseous form. It can be in any three forms, and we have a broader division of elements. They are categorized into three categories. One is metal, metalloids and non-metal. So all of us would have at least heard of metals and non-metals, if not metalloids. So we can differentiate between these three different kind of elements through their properties, through their physical properties. And now we will understand what are the difference in the properties of metals, metalloids and non-metals. So let's first start with metals and understand their physical properties and what is the difference between the properties of metals and other two. Okay, so let's list down the properties now. Now let's understand the physical properties of metals. But before starting the physical properties of metal, I'll just tell you one small thing. And that is, we have already spoken about elements, and elements are the ones which have same type of atoms throughout, right? Now, if I take two or more than two different type of elements and combine them together chemically, basically the formation of chemical bond happens between two or more than two elements, then the formation of a new matter takes place, and that is called as molecules or compounds. So if you remember, when we were discussing about the pure substances, that time I had made two differentiations and I was writing one was element, another was compound. So compounds are nothing else but the combination of different type of elements, but not in the random fashion, not like mixtures. They have been combined together chemically and formed the one single molecule. Basically, if I have taken two hydrogen atoms, or if I have taken hydrogen element and oxygen element, they have been combined together and the bond has formed between hydrogen and oxygen, and that bond is a chemical bond, and that is in a fixed proportion. That means always two hydrogen atoms will combine with one single oxygen, and then one molecule will be formed, and that will be a water molecule. Okay, so this is the difference between your compound and mixtures also. So mixtures are randomly placed together. There is no chemical change happening. There are no new bonds forming. Whereas when the compounds form, different type of elements, they combine together chemically. They form a new bond, and there are multiple ways how do they form bonds. So that you will be learning in next few chapters. There are ways they share electrons or they exchange electrons. One element give away electron, other element takes that electron, or they share the electron. So there are multiple ways how they make the bonds between them, and that kind of exchange of electron or transaction of electron when takes place, then a chemical bond forms, and then a molecule forms or a compound forms. Okay, so compound is also a pure substance and element is also a pure substance. Now let's talk about properties of metals. So first property is malleability. Malleability is nothing else but if you have taken a piece of metal, you keep hammering it without breaking it into pieces. You keep hammering it, and what will happen? A thick piece of metal will become flattened, and eventually will get converted into thin sheets. So that property of not breaking and converting into thin sheets is called malleability. Most of the metals possess it. It can be less or more, but metals have this property in them. Best malleable metals are silver and gold, and that's how, if I don't know whether you have ever noticed or not, but in the sweet shops there are some sweets over that there is silver layer on the top of it. So that silver layer is nothing else but the silver foil, or the thin sheet of silver, very thin sheet of silver, which is used to generally decorate the sweets. Or if you would have seen aluminium foils at your home, so it's not like there is a different process to make that aluminium foil. They take the aluminium piece and then through applying pressure, not through hammering mostly when it is getting produced in the industrial scale, but even if you'll keep on hammering it or you apply the pressure without breaking the metal, it gets converted into thin sheets, and these thin sheets are used in many different purposes. So we have seen aluminium foil, we have seen silver foil on the, or you can say silver layer on the sweet. So these are some real-time examples which you can relate with the malleability. Best malleability is shown by silver and gold. Next is ductility or ductile. Ductile is the property in which we basically take a metal and we keep stretching it. So stretching it is not like you take an iron piece and you'll start stretching and it'll become thin wire. No, it is in the presence of heat. You stretch it and make it thinner and thinner without breaking it. So basically when it gets converted into thin wires due to the stretching, then this property is called as ductility. This property also varies a lot. in the metals. So some have very less ductility, some has very high ductility. So that proportion, or you can say that property exhibition is different in each metal. Some are very ductile, some are very less ductile, but ductility exists in metals. Okay, and the most ductile elements are, or most ductile metals are, silver and gold. Okay, apart from that, you would have seen copper wires, iron wires, copper wires for your electrical fittings and all that. So these all wires have been produced through the ductility property only. Without the metal being ductile, without an element being ductile, it cannot be converted into thin wires. So copper wire is a very real time example which you would have seen all over in your homes, in the all electrical circuits and all electrical sockets and all that. So the wires are very common. These are not very common wires, but these are very ductile metals. These are very soft metals, hence can be stretched into the wires very easily. So that is the reason why gold is used for making ornaments also, because it can be easily converted into small shapes and through small wires. So there are multiple different reasons why silver and gold are being used for the ornaments also. Next is good conductor of heat and electricity. What do we mean by good conductor? Good conductor means they have capability of let electricity and heat pass through them. So if I talk about metals have the capability of let electricity or heat pass through them. How do they do so? How they have that property? Basically, metals have some free electrons inside. So that's a little higher level science. I'm just trying to give you a small idea. So when you talk about a metal piece, they have some freely moving electrons inside. Electrons are the part of atoms, to be honest. They freely move inside the metal, and that movement of electron helps in carrying the electricity and heat from one place to another. So basically, free electrons inside the metal piece helps in carrying electricity and heat from one end to another. How does it happen? Why does it happen? Right now we are not going into detail of it. You'll be learning it soon. Okay, so these allow heat and electricity to pass through them, and that is the reason why these metal wires are used for electrical conduction, as well as these metals are used for making the utensils at home so that we can cook. I don't know whether you have ever noticed or not. Let's say if you have kept a vessel, something is cooking on the flame in a vessel, and you have left a spoon in it by mistake, and later on you come back and you try to take out that spoon to do something, you would feel that spoon has become very hot. If you have not experienced it, at least your mothers would have definitely experienced. So that spoon will become very hot, though the spoon is not directly on the flame. Spoon is inside the vessel which is on the flame, but because the heat could conduct through those metals and reach till the end, you could feel that heat on that spoon. Similar way, you have electric fittings everywhere in your houses, and then there is one channel from where electrical supply is happening. How it goes on throughout in your house, reaches the electricity to each and every corner. It's basically those wires which conduct the electricity. Electricity travels from one point to another and let your house glow, or basically the electric appliances work because of that. So not the powerhouse or not the source of electricity is just next to all the equipments. It's the wires which conduct and bring the electricity to those appliances. Okay, so best conductor of electricity or heat is silver. Mercury and lead are supposed to be very poor conductors of heat. Lead is the poorest one. Almost negligible conduction happens in lead. So this is some sort of exceptions you can talk about. So whenever they'll ask which are the poor conductors of heat in metals, so you will be mentioning the name of mercury and lead is the poorest one. So lustrous means shiny appearance. All the metals have that shiny appearance. Their surfaces are quite shiny and they can be polished. Polished means when their upper surface gets little, it comes in contact with moisture and air and becomes a little dull. You can just scrub it off. You can use different methods to polish it, and again the topmost surface will start shining. So polishing is possible for metals, making them shine. Each and every layer of your metals are shiny. And the most shiny metals you must have seen are silver and gold. Because they are shiny, these are also used to make the polishes which we use on certain substances. Let's say I have taken a particular material, I can polish it through a different metals polish. Basically, if I have taken, let's say, a fake ornament, and then I can polish it with a gold layer. So basically, these metals can also be made into the liquid form and can be used as to polish the other substances to make their upper surface shiny. And because these are very shiny, they are also used as reflectors. What do we mean by reflectors? Basically, we have taken a glass, and I don't know whether you have ever noticed or not, but the glass is basically nothing else but a transparent thing, and then you polish it with a paint, and then that's how it starts looking like a mirror. So converting a glass into mirror requires the polishing. So you polish it through different type of paints which can cover one area, and then you can then it becomes shiny. Similarly, there are many places where these are excellent reflectors of light. Reflectors of light, as in, because their surface is shiny, when the light falls upon it, it reflects back. Due to this shiny surface, you must have seen, I mean, many people would have done that game where the light is getting reflected, light is falling upon it. Generally on the watches, the metal watches, if you do like this, or the glass surfaces, generally light falls upon it and goes back. Similar thing you can do with the plates and everything. So because their outer surface is quite shiny, the light falls upon it and reflects back. So wherever we require the reflectors, wherever we want light to reflect, we can use these metals, and they act as excellent reflectors. So silver among them is the best reflector. Okay, so these are some properties. Let's discuss few more and the exceptions. The exceptions means the metals which do not show these properties. So next set of physical properties of metals is hardness, tensile strength, and high melting point and boiling point. So now let's understand what do we mean by all these physical properties and how it varies from metal to metal. So hardness, for making all such materials where we require the hardness of the element or the metal, right? So most of the metals are hard. Hardness varies from metal to metal, so not all of them are equally hard. Some are very hard, some are soft, but there are few elements, there are few metals which are very soft and can be easily cut through the knife. So these comes under the exception of these metals, and these are sodium and potassium. Sodium and potassium are not considered as hard metals because you can easily cut them through knife, or by applying a little pressure you can break them into the pieces. So hardness property is not in these two elements. Apart from these two, most of the other metals tend to show the hardness property. Hardness may vary a little bit here and there, but they are hard and can be used for various purposes wherever the metal hardness is required, or for different kind of construction, building, vehicle, bridge construction, dam construction, wherever all these places, wherever we require the hardness of the substances, we use these metals in all those places. So iron, copper, aluminium are the ones which are the most common ones which you would have seen widely being used and are very hard also. Okay, very similar to this is the next property, that is high tensile strength. So these are hard. Okay, hard means cannot be broken so easily and do not break down into the pieces. Okay, so these are not brittle, they have that strength, and when they have that strength, they have the load bearing capacity also. What do we mean by load bearing? Basically, they can carry a lot of weight and hence will not break down. That is exactly what the tensile strength means. The tensile strength means metals can hold heavier weights without breaking. And again, a very good example of it is iron. That is the reason iron is being used for making chains, for making bulldozers, and for making all other building materials. So all these places where we require to carry the heavy weights, we use the metals. Okay, again, as I mentioned, as the hardness varies from metals to metals, similar way, the tensile strength varies from metals to metals. And because the sodium and potassium is not hard, they even don't have that load bearing capacity, and hence these are the exceptions for the tensile strength as well. Okay, next is having high melting point and boiling point. Most of the metals have very high melting point, and they vaporize again further at a very high point. That is the reason why we say they melt at high point and they vaporize at high point. That means they have a very high melting point and they have very high boiling point. For example, if you talk about iron, iron has almost 1500 degrees Celsius, approximately 1500 degrees Celsius of the melting point. So basically, just imagine how much is 1500 degrees Celsius. So water takes 100 degrees Celsius to boil. So 15 times of it, if you apply heat, then your iron piece can melt. So it is way more amount of heat what is required to melt the metal. Similarly, copper also has approximately 1000 degrees Celsius of melting point. So these are the metals which have very high melting point, and most of the metals have a very good range of melting point and boiling point. But there are again some exceptions in it. Again, sodium and potassium, all these properties are basically interlinked. More harder the material is, higher will be the melting point and boiling point. So sodium, potassium have low melting points, even lesser than the 100 degrees Celsius. So they can melt down even at a lesser temperature than water. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, they melt at 100 degrees Celsius, lesser than 100 degrees Celsius. And gallium is the best example. I mean, if you see, gallium's melting point is very low. It's even lesser than our body temperature. So if you keep a gallium piece on your hand, it will melt down. It will just absorb the heat from our hand and it will melt down. And if we talk about mercury, mercury do not even exist in the solid form. So it's in the molten form at the room temperature. So these are some examples which are exception to this property. Apart from that, most of the metals follow these properties. Exceptions are very important, because in the exams they majorly ask for the exceptions. Now let's see the next set of physical properties. Now, last two properties of metals are sonorous and solid at room temperature. Solid at room temperature I have already discussed though. Sonorous means nothing else but the sweet sound which metals produce while striking. So basically when you hit them, there is a metallic sound which comes out. So basically ringing kind of sound is called as sonorous behavior. So almost all the metals possess it. So when you'll hit them with something, they will produce a specific kind of sound which can be used for making musical instruments, bells and all these. So basically their usage is majorly in those musical instruments, making thin wires. So basically violin has metal strings in it. Similarly, when you talk about drums, so there are some steel plates on it, so that you strike and then specific kind of sound comes out. So all these, because of these specific sounds what metal can produce on striking, they are used for musical instruments and bells. And bells, you know, all the temples and everywhere you have the bells where, though the bells are not made up of purely metals, these are alloys. But in the initial timings, when long back they used to make bells, it used to be only of metals. Now I think we are using a specific type of alloy which has different metals mixed in it, and they produce a specific kind of not a very harsh sound, but a very soothing sound through the bells. Okay, so we have bells and musical instruments using this property of metals. So solid at room temperature, this we had already discussed. So most of the metals are solid at the room temperature. So there are one or two which are not solid, or which tends to melt down at the room temperature or at the body temperature. So the one which exists in the liquid form at room temperature is only one, and that is mercury. And the gallium is the another one which exists as solid, but if it comes in contact with the body or body type of heat, then it, or the temperature what our body possess, that kind of heat is there in the surroundings, then it tends to melt down. So there is a chance that at a room temperature also, so room temperature is generally 25 degrees Celsius what we refer to, and our body temperature is closer to 37 degrees Celsius, and at that temperature gallium melts. So if the room temperature is higher than is equivalent to 37 degrees Celsius or higher than that, then gallium will also be in the molten form at the room temperature. Okay, so here when we are referring to the room temperature, it is approximately 25 degrees Celsius is what we are referring to. So these are the properties of metals. Now we'll be discussing the properties of non-metals. All the properties description we have already discussed. So we'll be just talking about the exceptions and what they do not behave as, or what properties they do not possess. So we will not be doing again the detailed explanation of properties. So now let's see the physical properties of non-metals. So now we have already understood the properties of metals, and we have already understood the details of all these properties what I have listed over here. We'll just quickly go through the non-metal properties also. Most of the non-metal properties are opposite of metals. So whatever metals could show up, non-metals do not. So for example, if we talk about malleability, that means you can convert them into thin sheets or thin wires. Malleability, ductility was the core property of metals because of which they were widely used in many different areas. Now these properties do not exist in non-metals. Along with that, non-metals are brittle also. So basically, if you hammer, what we were doing in malleability and ductility, we were basically stretching them up or hammering it so that they can be converted into thin sheets or thin wires. But because your non-metals are brittle, when you'll hammer them or when you'll apply pressure to them to stretch it, they'll basically break down into pieces. So this is the complete opposite property of non-metals with respect to metals. Now similarly, next is bad conductors of heat and electricity. So as we know that metals are good conductor of heat and electricity, most of the metals are good conductor of heat and electricity except few exceptions. Most of the non-metals are bad conductor of heat and electricity. So basically they won't conduct heat or electricity, or they won't let heat and electricity pass through them. But again, there are some exceptions in this case also, and that exception is some forms of carbon. So carbon can exist in multiple forms in the nature. It can exist as a graphite, it can exist as a diamond, it can exist as a coal, it can exist as a coke. So all these are different forms of carbon. All of them are carbon, but arranged in a little different manner. So some forms of carbon tend to show the conductivity towards electricity as well as heat. So your diamond tends to show good conduction of heat, whereas graphite tends to show the good conduction of electricity. Both of these forms are of carbon. So diamond and graphite are purely made up of carbon. Only thing is how carbon is arranged in diamond and how carbon is arranged in graphite, that varies. But the atoms inside diamond and graphite are only and only carbon, right? Now come to the next, non-lustrous. So the most of the non-metals are non-lustrous. They do not have any shine in them. So they don't have any lustrous appearance. They generally have a very dull appearance, very dull surface they have. But again, the exception over here, iodine, when you look at it, has exceptionally lustrous appearance. And similarly, iodine has a very lustrous or shiny appearance. Now come to the next, that is generally soft. Most of our non-metals are soft in nature. In fact, when you talk about non-metals, non-metal exists in all the three forms: solid, liquid and gas. So here when we are talking about the softness, definitely we are not talking about liquids and gases. They anyways have the fluid nature. But when you talk about softness, we are specifically talking about those non-metals which are solid in nature. So the non-metals which are solid in nature are also soft. But again, there is one special exception over here. That is one of the form of carbon, that is diamond. It is one of the hardest material known on the earth. So there are few things which are very, very hard, and this is among the ones, I mean, in top 3 list. Okay. Next, not strong and low tensile strength. So we have already discussed what is strong and tensile strength means. Tensile strength means it should be capable of holding the weight. Though your diamond is hard, but it is brittle. It cannot carry the weight, even though it is very hard. So similar way, most of the other non-metals are soft in nature or liquid or gases, and that is the reason why they are not strong, and they don't have enough tensile strength to have the capacity of load bearing or capacity of carrying weight. Okay, so these are few properties. Let's discuss the next set of properties of non-metals. So next set of physical properties of non-metals is low melting point and boiling point, which is again the opposite of what we had seen in metals. So they had high melting point and high boiling point. So most of the non-metals are gases and liquids, and the ones which are solid also have a very low melting point. The ones which are liquid have a very low boiling point. And exception to this particular property is graphite. See, we had spoken about iron, copper, temperature in metals, I mean melting points in metals. So now graphite is one of the form of carbon, as I have already discussed, and if you look at its melting point is way more than the iron's melting point and the copper's melting point also. So it has a very, 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 very high melting point, that is 3700 degrees Celsius. So this is one of the exception for low melting point and boiling point. Next property is non-sonorous. So as we already know that most of the non-metals are liquids and gases, so definitely they cannot have sonorous properties. But the ones which are solids, they also have a very soft texture, and that is the reason when you strike them, they do not produce a specific kind of metallic sound or the ringing sound. So they all are non-sonorous. Next and the last property is low densities. Low densities means nothing else but the lighter element. Okay, so these non-metals are relatively lighter, and because as I mentioned again and again, I'm mentioning the same thing so that you do not forget it, that many of them are gases, hence going to be very light, and then liquids, and then comes the solids, and solids are also not very heavy solids. Okay, so these elements or these non-metals are lighter, and one of the exception to it is iodine. So iodine has a good density, so it is dense, it is heavy element, but apart from that, most of the non-metals comes under the low density category. So here now we have understood about metals and non-metals, both kind of properties. And when you talk about the total number of elements on the earth, number of metals are more than the number of non-metals. But mind it, as the metals are important for different kind of constructions and different usages, similarly non-metals are equally very important elements on the earth. When you talk about your own body, you talk about carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, all these things, or in fact the whole living structure is made up of non-metals. One of the most important element is carbon, and then comes carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. These are few very important non-metals. Carbon is the main basis for forming the living forms, and oxygen is present in the air which let us live. I mean, we breathe and then we survive. And carbon and hydrogen combine together to form different kind of living forms. For example, if you talk about plants, you talk about human body, you talk about animal body, you talk about microbes, you talk about unicellular organisms, you talk about multicellular organisms, you talk about single cell, you talk about multiple cell, you talk about vitamins, minerals, anything you talk about, proteins, carbohydrates, all these are made up of non-metals, and mainly carbon and hydrogen. Apart from that, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, all these play very important role in survival of the human being or survival of the living forms. Okay, now next comes the third category of elements, and that is metalloids. So now we have understood the difference between metals and non-metals in terms of their physical properties. In fact, I have listed the differences over here. You can note them down. This is the tabular form, how you have to write the differences when it is being asked in your school exam. We will understand what are metalloids. So metalloids are something in between metals and non-metals. So basically, these are those elements which possess some of the properties of metals and some of the properties of non-metals. So let me just write what are metalloids. Metalloids are elements which possess properties of metals as well as non-metals. So basically, they cannot have definitely the contradicting properties, but some of the properties will match with metals and some of the properties will match with non-metals. And there are very few elements which are metalloids, not all of them, not many of them. So there are huge number of elements which are metals, comparatively lesser number of elements which are non-metals, and very few number of elements which are metalloids, which possess both the properties. And examples for those are boron, represented by symbol B. Then comes your silicon, represented by symbol Si, and comes germanium, represented by symbol Ge. There are a few more, but these are the three common metalloids which we'll be dealing with even going forward. Okay, so metalloids are nothing else but the elements which lie between metals and non-metals, having the properties. Some of the properties are similar to metals and some of the properties are similar to non-metals, and that is the reason why they are widely used in those areas where we require both the properties together. For example, these kind of elements are used for making semiconductors. I understand you don't know what are semiconductors. So, but if you can just relate it through the English meaning of semiconductors, we know that metals are conducting elements which can conduct heat and electricity. I'm just telling you a very generic definition. It's not the right definition though. So metals are the ones which conduct heat and electricity. Non-metals are the ones which do not conduct heat and electricity. Semiconductors means which lie somewhere in between. That means these will conduct electricity or heat at in a certain conditions, or you can say in the presence of certain circumstances only they will conduct electricity. So basically they will conduct, but not always. So this is called semiconductors. You will get to know about semiconductors in much more detail when you'll go for the higher grade. So we are not going into depth of the science of semiconductors, but the similar way, wherever we require both the properties partially, we use the metalloid elements over there. Okay, so this is about, so now we have learned about metals, non-metals, metalloids. We have understood about the pure substances as such. Now in the next class, we'll be discussing about mixtures, how to differentiate mixtures, what all different type of mixtures are there, and then eventually when we understand what all different kind of mixtures can be there, how to separate pure substances from the impure substances. So all this we'll be learning in the next class. For today's class, we have learned, we have understood the basic terminology difference between pure and impure, and we have understood some details of the pure substances. And in pure we have gotten detail of elements, metals, non-metals and metalloids. We have understood the properties of metals, we have understood the properties of non-metals, and we have understood what are metalloids, compound, how the compounds form, that also I have discussed a bit. Next class we'll be talking about mixtures.